The small talk died fast. 1 second, the conversation was light, forgettable, the kind of back and forth that fills airtime between commercial breaks. And then, without warning, Colbert leaned into his mic and said a single word that changed everything. Epstein. The studio went cold. "I don't really understand," Trump had said in an earlier clip, his voice flat, almost bored. "Why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff." Boring. That was the word he chose. A man connected to one of the most disturbing criminal networks in modern history. Trafficking, private islands, private jets, powerful friends who looked the other way. And the most powerful man on the planet dismissed it like a weather report from last Tuesday. But Stephen Colbert wasn't going to let that word hang unchallenged. Not tonight. For years, Donald Trump had repeated the same story. He barely knew Jeffrey Epstein. The relationship was nothing. A casual acquaintance, a face in a crowd, a name he vaguely recognized. In interviews, at rallies, across dozens of social media posts, the message never changed. Epstein wasn't a friend. Epstein wasn't welcome in his world. Epstein was nobody to him. Trump repeated it so often, with such unwavering confidence, that millions of people accepted it without question. After all, if you say something enough times with enough conviction, it starts to sound like the truth. But Colbert understood something that most people forget. Repetition is not evidence. And on this particular night, he had no interest in debating Trump's words. He was going to let the past do the talking. The segment opened with a stillness that felt wrong for late-night television. No joke, no playful grin. Colbert sat behind his desk with his hands folded, his expression stripped of every trace of humor. He replayed Trump's most recent denial, a clip of the former president waving off the Epstein connection with a dismissive flick of his hand, insisting there was nothing to see. Colbert watched the clip alongside his audience, nodding slowly, almost thoughtfully, as if genuinely considering the claim. Then he turned to the camera and spoke. "Memory is a funny thing," Colbert said, his voice low and measured. "People remember what they want to remember. They forget what's inconvenient. They reshape the past until it fits the story they need today." He paused. "But luckily for all of us, cameras don't forget." The studio lights dimmed. The playful set decorations seemed to fade into shadow. A graphic appeared on the massive screen behind Colbert's desk. A number, bold and impossible to ignore. Trump's name had appeared in Epstein-related documents over 1,600 times. Colbert let the number sit there, glowing against the dark screen, while the audience processed it. 1,600, not 16, not 160. 1,600 mentions in official records tied to one of the most notorious criminals in a generation. The crowd stirred. Whispers rippled through the rows. Someone let out a low, disbelieving exhale that was picked up by the overhead microphones. Colbert didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize the number. He simply said, "That's a big number," and let it breathe. Then he began. He told the audience he wasn't going to offer opinions tonight. He wasn't going to speculate or editorialize or build some grand theory. He was going to do something much simpler and much more dangerous. He was going to show a timeline, just facts, just images, just the record that already existed, waiting in plain sight for someone to finally hold it up to the light. The first photograph appeared on the screen behind him. It showed Trump and Epstein standing together at Mar-a-Lago sometime in the early 1990s. Both men were laughing, not polite, camera-ready smiles, but deep, genuine, eyes-crinkling laughter. The kind of laughter that only happens between people who are completely comfortable with each other. Colbert studied the image for a moment, then turned back to the audience. "This," he said calmly, "is what barely knowing someone looked like before Instagram existed." A few nervous laughs scattered through the crowd, but Colbert didn't smile. His face remained flat, serious, as though the humor had been an accident he didn't intend to repeat. A second photograph replaced the first. Again, Trump and Epstein stood side by side. Their shoulders were nearly touching. They were relaxed, loose, surrounded by other guests at what appeared to be a social gathering. Colbert pointed at the screen without turning around to look at it. "Watch the body language," he said. "People don't stand this way with strangers. There's no stiffness, no polite distance. This isn't two men who happen to be in the same room. This is familiarity. This is comfort." The third image drew an audible reaction from the crowd. It showed Epstein leaning in close to Trump, his mouth near Trump's ear, clearly whispering something private. The intimacy of the moment was unmistakable. Colbert said nothing at first. He let the photograph speak for 10 full seconds, an eternity on live television. Then, quietly, he added, "Nobody invades another person's personal space like that unless they feel completely entitled to be there. That kind of closeness isn't accidental, it's earned." The fourth photograph showed both men at a public event, surrounded by cameras, clearly enjoying the spotlight. They stood with the ease of men who had shared dozens of nights exactly like this one. Colbert exhaled, a small, controlled sigh that carried more weight than any punchline could have. "Now I think I understand," Colbert said. When Trump says he wasn't really with Epstein, he must mean emotionally, because physically, socially, and publicly, these two men were very much together. Nobody laughed, nobody clapped. The room had gone past the point where reactions felt appropriate. People sat motionless, watching, absorbing, trying to reconcile years of confident denials with the photographic evidence burning across the screen in front of them. The fifth and final photograph appeared. It was different from the others. Not taken at a gala or a public event. No flashbulbs, no crowd in the background. It was casual, unposed, unguarded. The kind of image captured when both subjects believed no one important was watching. Colbert lowered his voice until it was barely above a whisper. "This one matters most," he said. "Not because of what they're doing, but because of how they look. This is how people behave when they believe no one will ever question them, when they feel untouchable." He let the image linger, then turned slowly back to face the camera. The humor was gone. The showman had left the building. What remained was something quieter and far more dangerous. A man simply presenting facts in a room that had run out of air. "This isn't about assigning crimes," Colbert said carefully, each word placed with surgical precision. "This isn't about guilt or innocence. That's for courts to decide. This is about something much more basic. It's about honesty." He paused, letting the words settle like a stone dropping into still water. "You can say you didn't know what someone was doing behind closed doors. Maybe that's true. Maybe you really didn't. But you cannot say you didn't know someone you repeatedly, visibly, publicly welcomed into your world." A wave of applause began to build, but Colbert raised a hand and stopped it dead. He wasn't finished. "Context matters," he continued. He reminded the audience of Trump's own words, comments made years earlier, captured on tape, in which Trump praised Epstein openly and remarked that Epstein enjoyed the company of women on the younger side. Colbert didn't interpret the quote. He didn't spin it. He didn't add dramatic emphasis or sarcastic inflection. He repeated it exactly as Trump had said it, word for word, and then sat in the silence that followed. "That's not interpretation," Colbert said flatly. "That's a recording." He explained why the photographs mattered now more than ever. "When powerful people rewrite history," he said, "they're counting on time to blur the edges. They're betting that if they repeat their version loud enough and long enough, repetition will eventually replace reality." He shook his head slowly. "But evidence doesn't fade just because someone wishes it would. Evidence doesn't care about election cycles or approval ratings. It just sits there, waiting." Then came the detail that sucked the remaining oxygen from the room. Colbert mentioned reports that Trump had once hosted a gathering at Mar-a-Lago, described as a party for young women in a so-called calendar girl competition. The catch? Epstein was reportedly the only other guest. Colbert paused, tilting his head slightly. "If only one person is invited," he said. "That's not a party. That's something else entirely." The audience didn't make a sound. Somewhere near the back of the studio, someone shifted in their seat, and the creak of the chair echoed through the dead quiet like a thunderclap. Colbert leaned back in his chair and folded his hands across his chest. His eyes were steady, unwavering, locked onto the lens like he was speaking to every single viewer individually. "You can deny facts," he said. "You can attack the people who bring them to you. You can shout louder than everyone else in the room. You can call it fake, call it biased, call it a witch hunt." He shook his head once. "But photographs don't argue. They don't campaign. They don't care who's running for office or what party they belong to. They just exist." The segment didn't end with a punchline. There was no applause cue, no musical sting from the band, no comedic button to release the tension. Colbert simply looked into the camera one final time and delivered his last line with the quiet weight of a man who had said exactly what he came to say. "If you repeat a lie long enough," Colbert said, "you might eventually believe it yourself." He paused. "But the camera never does." The studio sat in absolute stillness. The lights came up slowly, but the mood didn't lift with them. Crew members behind the cameras exchanged glances. The audience remained seated, frozen, as though standing up and walking out would somehow mean agreeing to forget what they had just witnessed. Within minutes, the clip detonated across social media. Supporters rushed to discredit it, calling it selectively edited, politically motivated, a coordinated attack. Critics shared it in waves, each repost accompanied by the same photographs Colbert had displayed. Cable news picked it up within the hour. Pundits argued. Headlines multiplied. The internet split down the middle the way it always does. But what made the moment land, what separated it from every other late-night political segment, wasn't fury, it wasn't accusation, it wasn't a comedian screaming into the void, it was restraint. Colbert didn't raise his voice. He didn't call names. He didn't build a case for guilt. He simply placed Trump's own words directly beside photographic reality. And then he stepped aside and let the audience decide for themselves. If that moment stopped you in your tracks, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. These stories don't come around often, and when they do, they disappear fast. Drop your honest reaction in the comments, not what you think you're supposed to say, but what you actually felt watching those photographs appear one by one. Because this isn't just drama, this is what happens when the truth has receipts and the camera keeps rolling. Stay close, the next one is coming sooner than you think.